Hey, this is Wayne Mulder with the On the Blue Line podcast. And if you really want to learn how to level up your life, you should be listening to the Time to Shine Today podcast with my good friend, Scott Ferguson. Let's level up.
Time to Shine Today podcast, Varsity Squad. This is Scott Ferguson. I got a treat today because he's actually a really good friend of mine, somebody that I respect absolutely immensely. He's a hero, which is a police officer, and he has a fantastic podcast called On the Blue Line. Don't go there quite yet because the knowledge nuggets that he drops in an interview and a little chat that I had with Wayne here was just absolutely fantastic. And again, his name is Wayne Mulder, speaker, writer, and again, a podcast host. And he came to being a police officer a little bit later in life, but he's made rank pretty fast, and I'll just leave it at that. And a lot of people respect him, and his biggest thing that he wants to do is give back and empower our heroes out there because there's a lot going against them right now, and I'm so glad that they have Wayne on his side. So if you really want to be leveled up, make sure you sit back, relax, break out your notebooks or digital note taker, because Wayne has some serious knowledge nuggets. And if you liked the episode, please hit the like button, subscribe, all that jazz. It really helps our sponsors and affiliates. So without further ado, here's the host of the On the Blue Line podcast and my good friend, Wayne Mulder. Let's level up. Time to Shine Today podcast, Varsity Squad. This is Scott Ferguson. I got somebody that's actually a pretty good friend of mine as well. He is a fellow podcaster. He has a fantastic show on the Blue Line, but don't go there yet because I want to hear what my good friend Wayne has to say. And he is a law enforcement officer, speaker, writer, and again, host of the On the Blue Line podcast. He's an advocate for law enforcement officer total health programs, which in this day and age, I'm not going to go political, but it's needed. And especially the mental hygiene and what we need for them to, stay in shape both mentally and physically. Wayne is all about it. And he's really about empowering the blue in their personal lives. And I'm so blessed that there's people out here in this world breathing air like my good friend Wayne Mulder to do that. And Wayne, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself to Time to Shine Today podcast Varsity Squad. But first, what's your favorite color and why?
Well, ironically, my favorite color was blue long before law enforcement. So it just kind of segued to that. When I was a kid, it was green and went to blue. And the why, I don't know. Maybe it's the royal part. Maybe it's the male part. I have no idea, but it's always been a favorite.
We reside in Florida, man, and we have these oceans things. It's nice and blue, right? That helps.
And there is something about blue water. You're absolutely right,
bro. I like the setup that you have with the bookshelves, and it's like I wish I had that instead of this green screen sometimes, man. But no, that's awesome. But Wayne, let's get in the roots, man. You're a police officer. Like when did you start getting, into the business in being a police officer, brother?
So I just pretty much finished my 11th year in this career field. So it's something I came to later in life. I was in my early 30s when I came into law enforcement, which usually people with that story came from something like military service and so forth, but that wasn't my story. I went into the business world, thought I was going to put plants in the ground, and I did for many years in landscaping, and then that didn't work out when the housing crisis hit Florida, as I'm sure we all remember.
Oh, yeah.
And then that is what led me to law enforcement.
Okay. And was it an easy process to get into law enforcement, being older, for lack of a better term, just kind of getting into that world, that business of serving the public? Did people look at you and say, man, you're 30 something years old and you're just getting into this? Were they questioning you?
So easy was definitely not my story, partially for a few reasons. First of all, the landscape company that I'd been running, we ended up losing. So you have all the headaches that come with that as far as debt and so forth. So that obviously looks like a negative, potential negative. But then you also had the fact that I didn't have a college education or anything either. And there's been a big push, a good push in recent years to really bring in law enforcement officers who have college degrees or at least some level of college credit starting a career. And being in the landscaping business and being a business owner, I always had that mindset that, why get the degree until the need was there? Since then, I have fulfilled that. But at that time, I hadn't. So that was kind of what led me. And it wasn't an easy process. In fact, there's a longer story to even segueing into law enforcement, if that's something you want to hear.
Absolutely. Let's hear that, man.
Yeah. So again, landscaper, love to work outdoors, love to work with my hands. I thought that was going to be my future. So when I started looking at what is something more secure, more set, my obvious inclination was start looking at FWC because I'm down here in the beautiful state of Florida, as are you. So I started looking at Fish and Wildlife Commission thinking, hey, I can work outside. Well, the state was having the same hiring issues that everybody was when the housing crisis took place. And it was a 2-year process to get through their hiring process to get a job. So I actually put myself through a local law enforcement academy. And that's when I met law enforcement officers and said, I like the boring parts of law enforcement. I like writing. I like talking to people. I like, in your 30s, it's no longer about driving fast and having shining lights.
Right.
You start enjoying these other things. So that's what brought me. And then there was a lot of affirmation type things that happened as well, where I just show up at a random prayer meeting one time by an invite. And the guy was like, have you ever thought of law enforcement? And I was like, funny thing, I'm trying to go down that road. And then fast forward a year and a half from that moment, and I hadn't met him before that evening, that minister ended up working at Disney with one of my first zone partners, neither of whom I'd met previously. They're both at Disney one day, and it's like, hey, we know this guy, this Wayne Mulder, that is is now working with me in any way. It just became an affirmation that I was walking down the right road.
That's beautiful, man. It's awesome how God puts people in your life, or people out there that are listening, your creator or whatnot, puts people in your life. And you had the intuition, if you will, to really kind of follow that gut feeling of, him in your calling and the pulling. That's awesome, man. And so what do you love most then about law enforcement? Because I know you said you kind of like the boring parts of the paperwork and whatnot, and serving and being friendly with a smile on your face and whatnot, but like, what do you like most about it?
Yeah, it's cliche, right? When law enforcement officers come in this career and you sit them down, you're having an oral board or whatever, and you're talking to them, hey, why'd you come in this career? And the cliche is, to help other people. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that's very much what I love about this job. I talk, you mentioned early on, wellness and so forth. And there's something I talk about, which is called Academy Resiliency Training. And I teach the spiritual wellness portion. And one of the things that I mentioned to them is this concept that, hey, you have the privilege of being there at just the right moment. When someone's having no one calls law enforcement on the best day of their life, right? You're not calling us and saying, hey, everything's going great today. I just want to see how you guys were doing. Usually it's the worst moment of your life in one way or another. Either you're the victim of something, or something occurred, or you need help, or whatever it is. And so to be able to be interjected into that moment where you can make a difference. Now, granted, I can't solve, if something tragic happens, I may not be able to do something that's going to solve that problem. But by my presence, I can bring something into that moment that hopefully will make a lasting difference. So honestly, that's what I love about it. Whether you look at it from an investigative standpoint, where I have the ability to try to solve something for you, to, bring some justice if you can, or from a leadership standpoint, where you can be a mentor to younger people and to really help them find the path as well. So.
Oh man, that's one of the best answers that I've ever heard. Honestly, man, in over like 400 interviews, dude, about, being there at that moment. And as a coach myself, people don't just say, hey, dude, I want to coach, and they spend thousands of dollars, right? They're going through something. And I feel privileged. I'm going to steal this, man. I feel privileged to be able to be that person, their light, their guide, and then not solve all their problems, but to get them into the right mindset for that transformation to reach their ultimate potential. That's amazing, Wayne. So, you've been in there 11 years now, and, you probably have people that kind of come up, and I heard you kind of say mentoring and whatnot. What do you think maybe are the biggest blind spots of a rookie cop?
So I think that when you talk about blind spots, honestly, people are overwhelmed when they first come to the career. That is one thing I think the public and the listener, it's good to kind of understand all the different roles, all the different hats that a law enforcement officer brings to the moment. At one minute you can be dealing with something that's, seemingly innocuous, seemingly benign. It could be as simple as, the proverbial cat stuck in the tree kind of call. I've literally fixed sprinkler systems on the job before. So, I mean,
with your
these things
background,
happen.
I'm sure that helps.
Yes, exactly. So, that it can be something like that. And then next minute, it can be the kind of tragic things we see on the news every day. So,
Yeah.
understanding that. So, I think when you talk about mentoring younger people, it's first of all understanding the totality of the job and learning to be able to seamlessly move between those certain roles and be able to be. It really is a customer service business. One of my first jobs was working at Kmart. So, I really many times go back to those foundational years of 16 to 20 years old, working as a department manager at Kmart for really the basis of how I come to this career. There's a lot of similarities there.
Thank you.
I think the second and most important thing is the officer wellness portion. Fortunately, there's been a big push towards that. But you mentioned me starting the podcast, and I did in 2019. And the reason I did that is I was getting to that 7 to 8 year mark in this career. And I began to understand that I saw changes in myself. I saw things that I was beginning to get concerned about. I saw the way that I reacted to things. I've talked before about, coming home and like watching loved ones sleeping, and you sit there and stare at their chest to see if their chest is moving and stuff. Because of so many of the negative things we see on the job, you start to find yourself in those situations. So that would be the second component. In fact, that's why I'm that's why I'm involved in the thing called Academy Resiliency Training, because the idea is we start early in their career, giving them the tools and resources to be resilient. It doesn't mean you're not going to face problems. Resiliency is the ability to spring back. It's like a rubber band stretched to its nth degree, and then you let it go and it returns. We're all going to face the problems. It's how you react to them and how you are able to work through them in the future.
And I love that you said that, because as a police officer, you're not just a law enforcer. You are sometimes a marriage counselor. You're a referee. There's so many different hats that you wear. And that's thank you again for saying that. And Wayne, when maybe again, I'm going to go back to because you're in the position now where you're mentoring the younger police officers that are coming up. Is there any good question that you wish they would ask you but never do?
That's a great question, Scott.
Or maybe you wish you would have asked your mentor?
Yeah, I think I would have, and funny thing is with this newer generation, because we're of an older generation and now Gen Z is coming into this career. So you've got guys, the same age as my son, and so a lot of times you feel like it's a fatherly type relationship that you end up having just because of the natural age differences. And that's part of that natural progression of being later in life when I joined the career.
Right.
I think a question, and it's not specific enough, so maybe, but it's just that general question, why, which they do more intuitively, but understanding why we do what we do, understanding why we react in a certain way, what that greater impact is. It's kind of like what you brought up with the statement that I made in reference to being there in the moment. When we ask why law enforcement acts and reacts in a different way, and we understand that it's not just simply we do this because Florida state statute says this, a general order says this, a directive says that. You've been in that military world. You understand that, that is ultimately, that's the Bible, if you would, in that world. You're going to do it because of that. But there's reasons behind that. And those are the greater reasons. That's what inspires it. That's what gives you your why. So I think that understanding that better earlier in my career would have provided for a more natural segue into just why I did the job, as opposed to just another profession, or I just show up and do my 12 hours.
The why is everything, no matter what. And that's exactly what I was hoping to hear out of the answer, because there was a militant part of it where you have to be in your line of work, but there's also, I heard, compassion, empathy. And sometimes I feel that that's missing in any kind of service oriented business. I don't care if you're serving food at a restaurant. You know what I'm saying? It's like you have to have the empathy, you have to have the compassion, whether it's for fellow workers or for your clientele that you're working with. That's awesome. So, Wayne, have you seen the movie Back to the Future?
I have.
Okay.
It's been years.
Yeah, I know how old you are, but I'm going to say let's go back to the double deuce, the 22-year-old Wayne Mulder. What kind of knowledge nuggets, that's what we call them here at Time Shine today, what kind of knowledge nuggets might you drop on the 22-year-old Wayne to maybe help him not change so much, because your journey is pretty unique, but to maybe help him level up, last through, or maybe shorten the learning curve just a little bit?
Yeah, I think for me, at that point in my life, I was too geared on career, and I was too geared. It, previous, I don't want to mention his name because if I do, it becomes instantly political. But a businessman out of New York wrote some great books that influenced me as a child. And those books really is how I saw myself. I thought for sure, I was going to be a deal maker. I was going to build this business. It was going to be in all these different states and so forth. And that became my focus. And so I focused so heavily on that, working we would laugh and joke in those days about landscaping by headlight. And we literally we'd get contracts where we're putting trees in the ground with the headlights of trucks on. In
Wow.
doing that, I lost the focus for family, for my son, now, fortunately, I've been very fortunate. I still am married, still have my son, still have the relationships. So in the end, it all kind of works out. But if I was going to go back and talk to 22-year-old me, it isn't so much about balance. I don't personally believe in the concept of work-life balance as it's often portrayed, because you can't do all these things.
Right.
But we have such a time that we have to do this or we have to focus on that, but not forgetting those more important things, whether it's family, community, and really wellness and building around those concepts.
No, I actually speak on stage about balance is junk. Right? Yeah. Believe me, because balance is zero, right? That if you look at a scale, balance, you're at zero. I was taught by my mentors and my coaches that it's about harmony, right? It's like, I liken it to a jazz band. Like, each person, each one of the 8 areas of harmony would be like God is one, personal growth, family, community, work, money, living environment, and health and recreation. And let's just say that God is the drums, or spiritual is your drums. Health and recreation is the guitar. Your business is the horns. And if any of those are out of tune, it sounds like junk. But if you can find the harmony within each one of those, it doesn't have to be perfect. Not everybody's a Mozart that's on the piano, right? Or whatnot, but if they're good enough, then you have that harmony. So thank you for saying balance is not the way to go. And I'm a full believer in that. And I'm not knocking anybody out there that says balance is the way to go. I just respectfully disagree with you. And so, Wayne, how do you want your dash remembered? That little line in between your incarnation date and your expiration date. Hopefully it's a way down the road, but your life date and your death date. How do you want that dash remembered on your tombstone?
When I was younger, my father was always a big listener to Zig Ziglar and other speakers of the time. And so I grew up listening to a lot of these tapes and a lot of things. And the Zig Ziglar Corporation, and one of the quotes that he often used and became their mission statement was, you can have everything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. Yeah. And I've had that quote written on when I was owner of a landscape company to what I'm doing now. It's sitting in my office at work.
It sits above my fireplace, bro. I know I live in Florida and have one, but it sits there. Yeah.
I think you should have a fireplace in Florida, but that's a whole different conversation.
But no, it's literally, that's up there. I'll take a picture and send it to you, man. I
believe it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the focus, right? I want at the end, like you said, prayerfully, it will be decades from now, but Lord knows it could be 5 minutes from now, because that's the reality of life.
Yeah.
But I hope that in that moment that I made a big enough difference in enough other people's lives. And I know, again, it sounds cliche, but that is really the focus of many of the things that I try to do.
Love it, man. I love it. So what do you think people misunderstand the most about Wayne?
I don't know. That's an interesting question as well. In the environment of law enforcement, I think that sometimes there's just a negative connotation that comes with the job where we don't see the person.
Really? Are you kidding me?
Again, so we're leveling up here. So we're talking and we're speaking the future we want to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes people see the badge, they see that. And I get it. Again, it's just the worst day of your life. Yeah. So you're going to, there's so many horrible stories out there. Sure. But to that end, you do really, we do a disservice when we don't see anybody, whether it's our firefighters, our military, anyone in uniforms of any type, when we don't see them as the person that wears that uniform.
Right. I love that because I've been blessed to have met you a couple times, and I observe people. That's my thing. I love to observe, and I see you. I'll glance over. We had dinner at Podfest, man.
Yeah.
And you were so ingrained in whoever was talking, you were locked in. I could tell that, and I really respect that in a human being. And then you're Squad. He's kind of like a stoic guy. Doesn't have too much to say, but when he talks, people like kind of listen. And I really, really appreciate that about you, Wayne. So, somebody observes, and that makes to me a great cop because, people are going through the worst day of their life. You're not going in there with preconceived judgments. You're going in there to find the facts, listen, and then respond and not just react. And I do respect you for that, brother. So,
Thank you.
Wayne, what keeps you up at night?
Well, ironically, it would be probably the flip side of this conversation is just the future of law enforcement.
Sure.
Where are we headed, where are we going? And again, we're not going to go down those dark roads, but yeah, it does concern me a little bit and what that future may look like. Because again, in the state of Florida, it's a 30-year retirement. So theoretically, I have another 19 years to go.
Right.
So what does that future look like? And then what does it mean for the younger people coming into this career? And then what does it mean for society? So I'd say that thinking is kind of what keeps me up.
Thank you for saying that because, we had our Nintendo and we had our Sega and whatnot, maybe even PlayStation. I believe you're probably almost 10 years behind me in age, but we kind of are still the same Generation Xers that do stuff. And a lot of these kids are locked into these one-shooter games or personal shoot, whatever. There's nothing wrong with them. I'm all about capitalism and selling video games and everything like that. Yep. But they've got to be reminded, especially if they go into law enforcement, this stuff is not real, bro. They've. Do you ever notice some of these rookies that are kind of coming up, in a generation behind us, that they have a different mindset where they're maybe invincible? And because, you play those games, you get killed, and guess what? You're hit reset and you're good again. Like, do you see that a little bit, or do you guys train them to say, man, this is real and we need to take this very seriously?
So the training process is over a year. Comparing it to the military, it'd be like kind of basic and your MOS all kind of rolled into one. It's a year to a year and a half process. But that being said, I maybe a little bit, just because in general, this generation, honestly, let me answer this in two ways real quickly.
You can be blunt, Wayne. I'm good with that.
Well, I like what you're saying. I haven't specifically seen that. Where we're seeing the biggest deficiency is communication.
Okay.
So much so, the ability to do this. So much so that the state actually changed and added communication exercises to the curriculum so that they began to learn to have dialogue. But to the video game thing, I just want to quickly mention where I see a bigger issue, and actually I saw this anecdotally with my son, is the not understanding the decompression mode. So again, I've got nothing wrong with them, big capitalist, but I was watching one of the games my son was playing, which was one of these first-person shooter games. And he was in an incident not all that different than a tragic incident I was involved in. And I said, son, we don't roll from this into another one. We have like an entire decompression. Like, you're talking to someone. There's a lot that goes into it because the same dopamine, the same rush that he's going through is happening, but then it immediately rolls into it again. So that's where I see the biggest concern and where I try to interject that there's nothing wrong with it.
Strong, bro.
It is.
That is strong. You just mentioned something also that's even better than the question I asked, is that when we were younger, it was like you just met at a parking lot or a baseball field and figured out what you were going to do. Right. There was now, okay, I'm from Detroit, and a lot of my people my age, I'm 50, they're executives in the big three now, Chrysler, General Motors, Ford. And they're saying that kids are not driving their car as much anymore because when we were young, we drive our cars to find the parties. Right. So which put miles on them, which means you'd have to buy another car sooner. Now they're texting and be like, oh, party's at Wayne's, or it's here. And it's just a communication is so AI now compared to what it was when we are in the police officers need to know that when they walk into a house, they're talking to a real person who's having the worst day of their life. That's awesome, dude. Thank you for saying that and bringing that up, bro.
And everything's predicated on that, because when we talk about de-escalation, when we talk about all these things that we want our officers to do, the bottom line is your ability to have the conversation.
That's awesome, man. That's fantastic. Wayne, what is your definition of a life well lived?
I would say it's a life well lived is a life that's lived in service of others. And again, that's kind of been a theme throughout this thing. But I would say that really is the point, because it's the only thing that's going to outlive you. I mean, the podcast is probably going to go away. Something else comes out and we're not doing digital downloads in the same way the 8-track tape went away. Someone may hold on to one, but none of that may last. Who knows what the future brings when it comes to technology. Chat GBT or whatever might be doing our shows for us here in another, 6 months.
You just nailed it with, I learned it from Steve Barber, someone that's one of my coaches. He said, do what you love in the service of people that love what you do. Time to Shine Today podcast, Varsity Squad. We are back. And Wayne, you and I, we've met up. We've already talked about a few of these questions before, one-on-one, and we talked maybe 10 minutes on each one. But today you have 5 seconds to answer them with no explanations. They can all be done that way. You ready to level up?
Yes, sir.
All right. Wayne, what is the best leveling up advice you've ever received?
Be the guy willing to raise your hand.
Oh, share one of your personal habits that contributes to your success.
Consistency.
Beautiful. You see me walking down the street, or, I'm coming to meet you, man. Fergie looks like he's in his doldrums a little bit, not feeling it. What book might you hand
me? Relentless Courage by Sergeant Michael Segura.
Beautiful. Put that in the show notes, Donnie. Thanks. Most commonly used emoji when you text?
Little guy with the sunglasses.
Nicknames growing up?
Wanger, anything that rhymes with wing, which, by the way, there's a lot of them.
Love it. Chess, checkers, or Monopoly?
Chess all day long, and then occasionally Monopoly.
Marty pants. Go-to ice cream flavor?
Ooh. Kind of a plain vanilla guy.
Me too, dude. I will, because I can put anything I want on it too.
Exactly.
There's a sandwich named the Wanger. Build that sandwich for me, brother.
Ooh, it's going to have to be something in those heart-stopping meats like salami. You just got to get a lot of salt in there.
Put a little man candy, a little bacon on there too, right?
There you go.
Love it. Favorite charity and or organization like to give your time or money to?
Of course, the kind of question that makes your mind go blank, but many of them that are out there helping law enforcement officers, especially the ones that are dealing with mental health type concerns.
Especially the ones that are legit. We live in Florida. It's a sunny place for shady people, and sometimes, but thank you for saying that, brother.
You're absolutely right.
Last question. You can elaborate on this one, my man, but what's the best decade of music? 60s, 70s, 80s, or 90s?
So I was a country guy. So I like the 80s and 90s country. I kind of felt like that was the last heyday of country music.
My whole family were sharecroppers in Alabama, and they moved to the industrial north to work at General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford. And I grew up on country. And then I kind of pulled away from it because I rebelled when I was in the military. Right. But now my woman, Susan, who you met, is the country. So we hit up every country concert we can, and she's got me into this modern country. But if I go back to the 80s with like Alabama or even Ronnie Millsap or something like that, and you get into the 90s with Aaron Tippin and stuff like that, I actually listened to it because a lot of the guys I served with in the military were legit cowboys, right? Like they would ride bulls and stuff, dude. Yeah. Like when they got me on one time. I have a video that I'm going to send it to you.
And those were the days of Chris Ledoux too. And that's when actual cowboys were becoming musicians.
Chris Ledoux and what's his name? John Anderson, and which did a little cowboying. But then Susan and I are locked into this Yellowstone saga, man. Do you watch that?
Love it. Yes. In fact,
Sunday,
one of my favorite quotes comes
back.
Sunday.
Does Spencer come back and save the day? I love it, dude. I'm stoked. I love it. So Wayne, how can we find you, my friend?
So the easy way is ontheblueline.com, on theblueline.com, and we're on all social media at On the Blue Line Podcast.
You have to listen to the show. I've checked out pretty much everything that kind of comes across my Spotify feed from him, and also his YouTube channel. He has some really fun shorts, and the interviews are there as well. And Wayne, if you could do me one last solid and leave us with one last knowledge nugget we can take with us, internalize, and take action on.
I think, and this is usually, again, could become kind of trite, but it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay that way. And I think whether you're in law enforcement or not in law enforcement, we all have bad days. We all have struggles. It's okay, but it's not okay to stay there. Get the help you need, and let's move forward. Or as you would say, let's level up.
Love it. And squad, like, I had such a fun conversation. Wayne and I were like, how are we going to take this conversation? But it was actually so easy. He found law enforcement later in life, through the work of God and guidance, and the person he met at the prayer meeting, and just got him really leveled up. He's a person that loves to work with his hands, and this way he gets to work with hands to help people in their worst moment. And like, he teaches it, and it's taught, through the academy resiliency training, that, you had the privilege of being at the scene in the person's worst moment and making their day a little bit better, and to solve their problems and to bring justice. And also that a cop wears different hats every day, just like kind of, it's a real estate broker, like we're marriage counselors, we are, psychiatrists and stuff that aren't even licensed. And we actually have to do that. And if you're looking to become a police officer, understand your why. Why do you want to become one? And if not, kind of figure that out, because it's a very important. I lean on the blue. I lean on the police to make sure that we're safe, and people feel better with people like Wayne that's out there, protecting us. Wayne is a person that failed. Let's just admit it. Let's throw it out there. He failed at his landscaping business. But the thing is about Wayne is he failed forward, and Wayne's a winner. He didn't make excuses. He made adjustments, and that's what winners do. And as Zig said, Wayne kind of brought out what Zig said, we can get anything we want by helping other people get what they want. I mean, my boy Wayne is planting trees he's never going to sit in the shade of, because he does what he loves in the service of people that love what he does. And lastly, remember, it's okay to not be okay, but if not okay, to stay there. And if you're there, reach out to Time to Shine today. I've interviewed over 400 counselors, coaches, even myself. I would love to be able to help you level up and reach your human potential as well. And I know Wayne's podcast does that as well. He brings that spotlight on an industry that needs it, and the good part of that industry. And Wayne, you level up your health, you level up your wealth, you're humble, yet you're hungry. I appreciate you coming on. You earned your varsity squad letter here at Time to Shine today. I absolutely love your guts, brother.
Thank you very much. It's been a privilege.
Chat soon.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of Time to Shine Today podcast. Proudly brought to you by Sutter and Nugent Real Estate Excellence, who can be reached at 561-249-7266 and online at www.sutterandnugent.com. If you are a business owner or professional who would like to be interviewed on Time to Shine Today, please visit timetoshinetoday.com/guest. If you like this episode, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. There's a link in the show notes to our website. Also there, you will see our recommended resources. We hope that you will support our show by supporting them. If you like what you've been listening to, it'd be great if you could just give us a 5-star rating and tell your friends how to subscribe while you're at it. I'm your host, Scott Ferguson, and until next time, let's level up. It's our time to shine.